Welcome everybody to this week's meeting of the Workers' International Network. As you know, it's 150 years of the Paris Commune. Well, without further ado, can I introduce Olivier?
So I will be speaking about the Franco-German War and the Commune and the end of the International Working Men Association. First phase of the war, Bonapartist France against German unity. A telescoped retrospective view gives us the impression that the Paris Commune was born directly from the Franco-German War of 1870-1871. But the deep working class and democratic forces which led to the Commune, the antithesis of the empire, were at work long before. For a fairly large extent, the war was initially an obstacle for them. The forces of the International in France in 1870, then its most promising, most prolific section, was still very confused, but questions of revolutionary strategy, including that of weapons, were addressed by officials like Eugène Varlin. The natural development of the transition from the political crisis of a regime to the revolutionary crisis was thwarted by the Bonapartist initiatives taken toward of it. Liberal opening with the government of Émile Ollivier, then the plebiscite, then the spectacular trial against the International, accused of being a secret society wanted to liquidate Napoleon III, and finally plunge headlong into the provocation stretched by the Chancellor of Prussia, Bismarck, triggering the Franco-German War. This was the most unfavorable alternative from working class viewpoint. The empire sought to reenact the war of 1792, but this time as being the enemy of the rights of the German nation. If he won, he was strengthened and Germany was pulverized, opening a deep period of reaction in Europe. If he lost, the Second Empire would certainly collapse, but not under the blows of the masses. A bourgeois republic, fully preserving the imperial apparatus, with its prefectural framework, would see the light of day, and this happened quickly with the Battle of Sedan and the capture of Napoleon III by the Prussians. The understanding of the progressive nature of the war on the German side at first, despite Bismarck and the King of Prussia, ran counter to the dominant mental representations along militants outside Germany, and even in part among those in South Germany, like Wilhelm Liebknecht. The tendency to believe oneself again in 1792 remained latent. Subject to this reservation, the calls for the universal fraternization of working classes, launched by the French internationalists and taken up by the workers' meetings in Brunswick and Chemnitz, as well as the Berlin section of the International, affirmed an independent workers' policy. For the Brunswick Committee, who was the leadership of the Eisener tendency of the Social Democrats of Germany, as well for Marx and Engels, it was not, however, a policy of no to war or war to war in general, but while distrusting dynasties and despots, it did consider this war to be legitimate, national and defensive on the German side. At least as long as it does not degenerate because of the Prussians in a war against the French people with annexion, that happens afterwards about Alsace-Lorraine. In this case, Marx warned the war would also become anti-national against the German people, thwarting the progressive content of its unity by monarchical affirmation and imperial drift, and thus re-editing in worse and greater what had been the history of Prussia and Germany after the wars of liberation against the First Napoleon. Part 2, the second phase of the war, Bismarckian Reich against French Republic. Bonapartism, by its last military coup d'etat, which was basically the entry into this war, had signed his own death warrant, while depriving the masses of the historic right to overthrow him. Bismarck took the emperor prisoner. Overnight, Sedan converted the war into a reactionary invasion of France by the Prussian armies. The masses in Paris and Lyon begin to burst in, but they are deprived of the essential, both on the question of state and government and of the conduct of the war. The German Workers' Party, that of Lassalle as well as that of Eisenach, now oppose the continuation of the fightings. Marx and the General Council of the International, in the latter's second address on the Franco-German War, call for the defense of the French Republic without illusions about its character. French workers must not let themselves be carried away by the national memory of 1792, and condemned the project of annexation of Alsace-Lorraine by remarkably predicting that it will eventually lead to a Franco-Russian alliance and to a terrible war of races between the Germanic people on the one hand and Latin and Slavs on the other hand. To the French labor movement, the advice is very cautious. May they calmly and resolutely take advantage of Republican freedom to methodically proceed with their own class organization. This is roughly the approach of the French internationalists, although periodically they are drawn with the Blanquists into attempts to force attack, which are not intended to overthrow the bourgeois republic, but to force national defense. The Blanquists, in fact, adopted on September 4th, when the Republic was proclaimed, a policy of support for the national defense, which equates in the spirit the present moment with 1792. The Swiss Jura internationalists, close to Bakunin, believing that the socialists had seized power on September the 4th in Paris, call on the 5th to form an international brigades converging from all over Europe. They said, Republican France represents the freedom of Europe, monarchical Germany represents despotism and reaction. Republicans of all sides must rise up and march in defense of the French Republic. The author of this initiative, James Guillaume, which later argued that in the first hours he and his companions had believed in the advent of the Social Republic in Paris, but that by the next day they understood that it was not only the bourgeois republic. Except from the next day, he wrote this to D. Baker. Without doubt, the French Republic is still bourgeois, but if the International gives it its support, this republic will infallibly become social in the very near future. The Jura anarchist appears here for the far left wing of bourgeois radicalism. This unsuccessful call for Republican anti-German war was the highlight of their activism throughout their history. Michael Bakunin's real position was not the same. He too wanted France to win, but he understood that such an objective lay in the revolutionary struggle against a republic which was, as a state, only continuated Bonapartism. Hence, his famous insurrectionary attempt in Lyon at the end of September, which differ from the Blanquist attempts only by a certain anti-state ideas.
Grassroots level, then I think we will start to see.
Karen, I think it was Rachel. Sorry, Olivier, go on.
So I pass. For Bakunin, this attempt is everything. He said, if the social revolution in France does not emerge directly from the current war, socialism will be killed all over Europe and will not be resuscitated for a long time yet. This pessimism is linked to his conviction that Germany is the mark of authoritarianism. Its victory can only stifle any prospect of emancipation, which the slave and the Latin peoples are the bearer. In Marx, in the other hand, if it is important to defend France now and to limit Prussian imperialism as much as possible by fighting against the annexation of Alsace-Lorraine, the shift from the center of gravity of the European workers' movement from France to Germany is a good thing, and any French workers' insurrection that would take over the war would in reality be a regression around 1792, leading to chauvinism on both sides. A period of organization and maturation throughout the continent is possible, provided that the situation in France does not lead to a bloody premature defeat. Now, next part, the end of the war. Between the capitulation of besieged Paris on January 28, 1971, and the outbreak on March 18 of the civil war between the armed proletarian people of Paris and the bourgeois state, the Treaty of Versailles was signed on February 26, which was to become de facto the founding charter of the capitalist order on the continent until 1914. Despite all the efforts made by the French provisional government to prevent the people from defending themselves, a large part of the Parisian proletariat was armed as part of the National Guard. The stabilization of the bourgeois state in France after the fall of Napoleon III and the military defeat therefore required the resolution of this problem. From a Blanquist as well as a Bakuninian perspective, insurrections in France had only been envisaged within the framework of the war and not following the defeat. The Commune imaging was only remaking 1792 when it was about something else. Michael Bakunin, throughout this period and since the Lyon failure, has been working on the drafting of a major work, which remains unfinished. It was titled The Knuto-Germanic Empire and the Social Revolution. The Knuto-Germanic Empire is naturally Germany. An important reflection on the state, the history and the philosophy of the principle of authority. This work also testifies to what Bakunin, after the defeat in Lyon, no longer envisaged a revolutionary offensive. The Commune will be inopportune as much in his logic as in that of Marx. Next part, the Commune. On March 18, Thiers Ed said to me, I speak for 15 minutes. I am at the middle of the speech.
Olivier, you've been going about 15 minutes now. Would about 30 altogether be sufficient, do you think?
10 minutes.
Another 10 minutes, yeah, brilliant. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay. The Commune. On March 18, Thiers, Adolphe Thiers, tries to make the cannon and the weapons of the Parisian National Guards. The spontaneous insurrection with the women of the Montmartre district on the first row undoes this provocation, and quickly the social fear of the bourgeoisie, the popular spontaneity, and the cunning of Thiers, who intends to retreat to come back in force, empty Paris of his privilege and of the state apparatus, handing it over to an elected self-administration, which will be the Paris Commune. This insurrection finally arrives victorious in the great city of revolutions, arrives, however, late and at the wrong time. The war is over and the Prussians are present, thus the threat waits. The bourgeois government has the support and the apparent legitimacy of a constituent assembly of reactionary rural, elected at foot speed under Prussian threat, and the province, which is already much restless and tired, will not follow suit. The most likely fate was therefore that on which Adolphe Thiers bet: Paris isolated, then bled. In this sense, the Commune was inopportune, as it led to a major defeat for the working class on a European scale. Karl Marx, as soon as its outbreak was proven, accepted it as a fact and fully committed himself to its support, with the General Council as a means of propaganda and organization. Bakounine, in his conferences in the Val de Saint-Imier, just as clearly took a position for the Commune. Once there, the Commune ceased to be untimely. It dominated and determined everything. It even had a slim chance of success. For this, an opinion immediately formulated by Marx, Engels, and discussed in the General Council, it would have been necessary to take the military offensive resolutely and quickly and crush Versailles immediately. Instead of launching into this attack, the Central Committee of the National Guard was absorbed by the municipal election, which formed the Commune proper on March 26. The situation was such an offensive would have created, if one can risk the game of hypothesis, would undoubtedly have been that of a genuine democratic and secular republic, giving free rein to the development of class antagonism, but not against the full social republic, because it is not obvious that the exercise of real power by the armed proletariat, effective in Paris, could have been generalized to whole of provincial and rural France. It would have been a huge victory already. From the moment when Paris was again besieged, then invested, the advice coming from Marx focused on the seizure of the Bank of France, which would have been the best of all hostages, on the fortification of the side exposed to the Prussian, in warnings towards some bowling Republicans, and in the suggestion to shelter the diplomatic and police document sized for publication. On the whole, therefore, it was harsher and more assertive political and military through probably quite abundant oral clandestine contacts. The level of consciousness of the majority of the leader of the Commune was naturally below the level reached concretely by it in the Acts. The majority was not Blanquist but Republican, and always believed to live again in 1792. Particularly incompetent and irresponsible element in this framework there did not do it service. The Blanquist was the marching and effective wing, military speaking, of the majority without being entirely assimilated to it. The minority came mainly from the ranks of the International and pushed for social measures while opposing the imitation of the revolutionary terror by the majority, which wanted to attack heads rather than take it in the pockets, according to a happy phrase lent to Bakunin. The internationalists are at work in the labor, finance, education, and supply committees, eager to rebuild all public services on new bases outside the existing state. The communalist theme, consisting in calling for the formation of communes everywhere, was a confused way of combining the will to fight and extension, the abolition of current forms of the state, and a certain federalist and mutualist culture of Proudhonian kinship. Let's not confuse it with decentralization in the state since taken in France at the end of the 20th century. It resulted precisely by the liquidation of the parasitic state apparatus of the bourgeoisie and Bonapartism in achieving genuine national unity. The Commune by itself carried out few direct incursions into the land of property, especially the seizure of the workshops abandoned by their bosses, measures against debts and rents, about debts and rents, and the protection of apprentice bakers. The main thing is that the Commune put an end to conscription and the standing army, proclaimed and put into practice the arming of the people, including the participation of women. It severely purged the whole police. It has expropriated, repressed, and driven the clergy out of schools, and it established the eligibility with a capped salary of all senior officials, including the judiciary. The four sets of measures toward the army, the police, the clergy, and the bureaucracy are decisive. They began the destruction of the bourgeois state and the state in its usual forms, and its replacement by the self-organization of the armed people. Azengel will summarize it in a text published for the 20th anniversary of the Commune. Look at the Paris Commune. It was the dictatorship of the proletariat. Beaten, the Commune was savagely repressed and aroused the social hatred of the ruling classes. Dead, missing, deported, banished, numbered by tens and tens of thousands. Varlin, who was in secret correspondences with Marx and Bakunin, among others, was massacred after a vile policeman stole the watch that his fellow workers had given him for the successful conduct of the strike in 1864. After the Commune, Marx, the General Council, the Trade Unionists, and Bakunin. The defeat is consummated on May 28. 2 days later, Marx, exhausted and sick, submits to the General Council the declaration known as the Civil War in France, in fact, address of the General Council on the Civil War in France, a fundamental text whose content will be more or less forgotten thereafter until 1917. The political lessons of the Commune are grouped together in section 3. Section 1 is being a gallery of unflattering portraits of the head of the French bourgeoisie. Section 2 is dealing with the circumstances which gave rise to the appearance of the Commune, and section 4 of repression and calumnies. With the Central Committee of the National Guard, it was the proletariat that had seized power in Paris. The democratic form of states that it established gave its true content to universal suffrage through the responsibility and revocability of elected officials, forming political bodies acting both on the legislative and executive field, destroying the four pillars of the permanent state: army, police, clergy, and bureaucracy.
Yeah, you've about 25 minutes now.
Sorry?
You've had 25 minutes now, just letting you know.
5 minutes, yeah, I
You've had 25 minutes, I'm just telling you.
Okay.
Okay.
Only the proletariat has achieved democracy and the cheap government that the bourgeoisie claims to want and that the middle classes and peasantry would like to have. Democracy, which pits its mayor against the prefect, its schoolmaster against the priest, and its own person against the gendarme. The workers' government has demonstrated that it is potentially the true national government and at the same time international in the full sense of the word. The conquest of political power by the proletariat therefore does not consist in the management of the existing state apparatus, but in its destruction, which the two complices, Marx and Engels, repeat again in 1972. Assuming political responsibility and unconditional defense of all actions of the Commune, Marx and the General Council were designated by an international press campaign as a universal conspirational center, having fomented and remote controlled the Commune and preparing other blows. The French and Spanish government call on all governments in Europe to mount a comprehensive police crackdown on the international, referred to as a death threat to civilizations, a threat centered in London. As Marx says, bourgeois understanding, soaked in the spirit of the police, naturally imagines the international association as a sort of secret conspiracy whose central authority orders from time to time explosions in different countries. It is what at this point that Marx became a celebrity for the general public. However, until then, there was no Marxism. There was an enormous intellectual, economic, historical elaboration done under the pen of Marx, and to a lesser extent and with interesting differences by Engels, elaboration of which the major part was still unpublished. There was a network of political friends who were more or less loyal, but who were not bound by any of loyalty. And above all, there was the role of Marx within the General Council. But this had been precisely decisive insofar as Marx had not sought to delimit a current of his own, but to express the common movement. The sects which failed to get their hands in this organism denounced the stronghold of Marx, unable to understand that one could function otherwise, that they did it themselves. But no, in fact, there was no Marxism yet. I prefer to stop. I prefer to stop now because it could be quite boring, and I will send the text to Ed in order to publish it on the website.
Thanks for that excellent start. Now I'll call on the people to make contributions, ask questions, pass comments. Usman.
Thanks, Olivier, for this brilliant presentation. Just wanted to know, in today's political climate and schema in France, what is the three things which are still being used and people are very, very proud of when it comes to people's representation, which are a direct consequence of the creation of this commune and what you've just talked about, the war until
We
now.
can hear you. Do you want to speak now? Yeah.
Yeah, if I may. Okay, just Comrade gave us a lot of information on a huge subject. Necessarily, I will have to focus on a couple of points. Lessons of the Paris Commune. From the positive side, the Commune for first time gave in practice the form of the state, the form that the socialist state would take. It's not accidental that Marx completed its theory referring to the dictatorship of the proletariat, referring to the form that the socialist state would take after the Paris Commune. That was one of the biggest lessons of the Paris Commune. The other lesson for us was the heroism of the working class people of the time, ready to do anything to defend the collective interest. But there are also great lessons from the negative point of view, not from the negative performance of the Commune that lead to the necessity of building the conscience factor, the leadership of the movement. Revolution is a process that lasts for a shorter or a longer period, but it has its peaks. These peaks are the decisive moments, the moments which decide which camp will prevail. And in this, the inheritance of the Commune is very poor. It was Lenin that in the early October of 1917 said that now is the time to seize power. And he reached this conclusion after evaluating the situation, especially in the peasant movement. He realized, he appraised that the mood in the peasantry was ready to support the working class of the basic two towns. This needs a leadership that is going to be trained through decades of struggles and through volumes of theory. The July days, it was the first big retreat of the movement that enabled the leadership of the Bolsheviks to derive the correct conclusions and move the correct and take the correct action. If it wasn't for that, the revolution with all its might would have been finished at that time. It is also the questions like how we face the army. In this particular time, you see the development of events and you evaluate. There are no preconceived theories how a revolution will unfold and how you behave and react in this or the other situation. So the leadership, the necessity to build a leadership is probably not the most important, one of the most important lessons of the Paris Commune. And another thing, the last thing I'm going to mention is, and it's not necessary to build a capable leadership. This leadership must have gained the confidence also of the working class through being correct in major issues during its time. During the time of the revolution, there is no time for democratic discussions. A central committee or a politburo will take all the decisions, and the whole of the party would have to follow and would have to fight within the movement to gain support in these decisions. No time for. So no time for democratic discussion during this period. So not only to build the task is to build the leadership, but the leadership that must have proved at least to the vanguard of the working class that can be correct and was always correct on the major issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sotiris. We're going to have to do from now on, if I know who's going to translate, that if they could do it a sentence at a time, because at least one hand has gone up. And obviously French to English will need to be translated. Is that all right with everybody? For Bob to summarise what Sotiris has just said, it might be difficult.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alors, le camarade a dit, c'est le camarade Vlachos. Il a raconté les plus grandes leçons de la Commune de Paris du point de vue positif. C'était pour la première fois, cela a donné en pratique la forme qu'allait prendre l'État socialiste. Ça, c'est une des plus grandes leçons. Aussi, il faut mentionner l'héroïsme de la classe ouvrière qui combattait pour la Commune. Du point de vue négatif, il y a aussi des leçons. Sotiris a parlé de la nécessité de construire la conscience, le parti conscient de la direction de la révolution. De ce point de vue, le travail de la Commune était appauvri. En comparaison avec Lénine, qui a compris en 1917 que maintenant c'était venu l'heure de la révolution, parce qu'il a compris surtout les développements entre les paysans. Donc, Lénine a pu identifier la situation en 1917 comme une situation révolutionnaire. Et les jours de juillet ont aussi donné un exemple de la direction consciente bolchevique. Il fallait expliquer que Lénine a held back. Il a découragé les éléments les plus enthousiastes au mois de juillet à Pétersbourg, Petrograd. Mais les bolcheviks ont aussi pu identifier le moment nécessaire pour déclencher la lutte révolutionnaire. Dernier point, cette direction doit aussi gagner la confiance de la classe ouvrière. Auparavant, dans une révolution, il n'y a pas de temps pour une longue discussion démocratique. Mais comme Lénine a dit dans son œuvre contre l'ultra-gauche, il a expliqué que les liens entre les bolcheviks et la classe ouvrière, c'était qu'à chaque moment, les bolcheviks ont pu esquisser la ligne pour la classe ouvrière et prouver qu'ils ont eu raison. Donc, c'est à peu près... je m'excuse si j'ai déformé les remarques du camarade, mais je crois y avoir communiqué l'essentiel.
Hey, Laurent, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Olivier, for your intervention and your exposé. It was very good. I have a question. We all know the Commune of Paris, but some communes are operated in France with the Commune de Paris. I think to Toulouse, Marseille, Limoges, Narbonne. Can you speak about this commune? They are very short in the time, but can you speak about this commune with Commune in France, the other Commune in France? Thank you.
Okay. Can I just bring Roger in next? We can go back, perhaps go back to your question in a minute, Laurent. Roger's having trouble with his internet, and he's asked if he can come in early in case he loses it. So are you ready, Roger?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Look, comrades, I will speak very briefly because my connection seems to be fading in and out. I wanted to say, when I sent out the notice for this meeting, I included a couple of quotes, and I think the quote from Marx that I put in, just one sentence, sums up everything almost you need to know, not just about the Paris Commune, but about everything that we're doing and everything that we're striving for. When he said, the working class must on the one side do away with all the old repressive machinery previously used against it itself, and on the other, safeguard itself against its own deputies and officials by declaring them all without exception subject to recall at any moment. Now, the reason why the first of those conditions is so important is because it's an example of the fact that Lenin learned from the experience of the Commune. And this is a lesson to every revolutionary group that has ever existed since. And I think one thing that distinguishes WIN from many, if not most of the others, is that we take seriously the need to learn from the actual spontaneous movements of the working class, rather than think that we have orders and that it's for us to dictate to the workers. Until that point, Marx had not thought of that point. He had thought that I'm getting a note connection is unstable. Up until then, Marx had not really given consideration to the fact that our state machine had to be completely destroyed and that the working class must create its own apparatus in order to rule. Now, the fact that that's important, not only is it important in itself, but the lesson that learn from the working class, rather than consider it to be a one-way process of teaching. I mean, there's so many examples of it. When the Soviets were first created in the 1905 revolution in Russia, the local Bolsheviks dismissed them precisely because they said this is a threat to the leading role of the Revolutionary Party. And in fact, it was Lenin and Trotsky, of course, who was the head of the Soviets, who said, no, this is.
You just turn your video off and you probably won't break up so much.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. Yeah, I think when you turn your video on.
Okay, yeah, okay. All right. So I mean, that was another example of how the need to learn. There are many, many more. Lenin's whole conception of how the revolution would develop in Russia was he had to modify that, and he changed it on the eve of the revolution in April 1917 with the April Theses and so on. I won't go into any more detail because partly because other part of the quotes is that the workers have to safeguard themselves against their own deputies and officials. Now that is the complete answer to 100 years of distortions, both by bourgeois historians and by Stalinist commentators on the course of the Russian Revolution, because that is the complete answer to what went wrong, if you like, if you want to put it that way, in Russia. That the deputies and officials thrown up by the revolution became a ruling caste, and they rose above society and they became outside of the control of the working class, and therefore it's a complete indictment of Stalinism, of the whole development of Stalinism since straight after the Russian Revolution, that is what went wrong, that in the conditions that existed at the time, the Russian working class were not able, they did not have the conditions in which they could exercise control over their own state apparatus. And that's why it degenerated and became a monstrous and bureaucratic excrescence. I'll stop there because I think I'm pushing my luck. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Roger. Bob, are you able to translate that for Laurent?
avant, dans la préparation de cette discussion, Roger a circulé 2 documents et entre autres choses, il a cité une phrase de Marx en relation à la Commune. La classe ouvrière doit abolir la vieille machine répressive et d'autre côté, la classe ouvrière la révolution doit se protéger soi-même. Lénine a appris les leçons de la Commune. Il a appris de la lutte spontanée de la classe ouvrière dans la Commune. Jusqu'à 1871, Marx lui-même n'avait pas consacré des pensées à la question de la destruction de la vieille État, du vieil État. Mais après, il a commencé à considérer les questions spécifiques qui surgissent en ce moment. 1905, la révolution a produit les soviets en Russie. D'abord, les bolcheviks ont été sceptiques à l'égard des soviets parce qu'ils ont cru que les soviets ont mis à côté l'importance du parti révolutionnaire. Mais Lénine a changé son avis et il a changé ses opinions là-dessus. Alors, je crois à peu près c'est le plus important que Roger a dit. Il a dit aussi que dans cette phrase de Marx, on voit aussi le clé pour comprendre les événements antérieurs en Russie après 1917. C'est-à-dire la classe ouvrière a dû démolir l'ancien État, mais elle n'a pas pu absolument défendre le propre État qui a été pris par une bureaucratie. Donc, je finis là.
Beatrix? Don't forget to unmute.
Yes, yes, I wanted to go back to the quote by Eleanor Marx, saying that it was the first attempt of the proletariat to govern itself, and not the replacement, as happened later in the Soviet Union, of a class by another class. And how would comrades respond to that? Because I think, you know, a lot of what has been said so far has been quite negative about the Commune. And of course it was, and of course the consequence, yes, of course, the end of the Commune. But Bob, would you like to translate me or shall I translate myself?
Tu dis en français.
Ok. Bon, ce que je disais, c'est que la citation qui m'interpelle le plus, c'est celle d'Eleanor Marx, qui décrit la Commune comme une tentative du prolétariat de se gouverner lui-même et non le remplacement d'une classe par une autre, comme ce qui s'est passé par exemple en Union soviétique après la révolution russe par exemple. Est-ce que les camarades seraient d'accord avec cet héritage de la Commune, cette notion de l'héritage de la Commune?
Thank you, Missy. Finn.
Comrades, that's a very, very interesting and very informative opening contribution by Olivier. I just want to make some points and ask some questions. Firstly, Engels, in his introduction to the Civil War in France, written in 1891, said that the most important decree of the Commune was the organization of manufacturing industry into a single unified force within the state. Now that's very...
Could you stop there, Finbar, and I'll translate?
Of course,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Alors, 1891, Engels a écrit dans le préface à la guerre civile en France que le décret le plus important de la Commune était l'incorporation de toute industrie de manufacture sous... sorry, could you repeat the very last words you said, Finbar? It's the incorporation of all the
manufacturing industry was brought into a unified force by the Commune.
Était apporté dans une force unifiée par la Commune. Continue.
Yeah, so Engels was trying to show that it is possible to organize manufacturing industry in a unified way within the state. No,
il voulait faire voir que c'était possible de unifier toute l'industrie dans une force unifiée sous l'État.
It has a particular relevance in France for today. If you bear in mind the governments of Mitterrand, which nationalized huge swathes of French industry and then denationalized it towards the conclusion of his regime. So that important lesson of Engels, that the lessons that Engels mentioned, was proven in France itself, with the later collapse or decline, if not collapse, of the Socialist Party because of its failure to stick by that policy of nationalization. Yeah.
C'est-à-dire que cette idée a une application spécifique en France parce que sous Mitterrand, une très grande partie de l'industrie française était nationalisée, mais après, plus tard, le même gouvernement a dénationalisé, privatisé ces industries, ce qui allait ensemble avec la chute du Parti socialiste.
I think that's an important lesson for all of us active in the labour movement, to draw that lesson that Engels pointed. And now I have two questions.
OK. Je crois que c'est une leçon importante pour nous tous. Alors, deux questions.
Now, firstly, Engels was critical of the failure of the Commune to take over the Bank of France. So my question is, could you tell us something about that? How did that show its, I mean, it's correct, of course, the bank should have been nationalized, but what effect did it have in France when the Bank of France was not taken over by the Commune? So that's one question.
Une question, première question. Engels a critiqué que la Commune n'a pas pu, n'a pas pris, taken over, pardon, prendre la Banque de France. Et Finbar demande quels sont les résultats de cette faillite de la part de la Commune. Second question.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Second question relates to the majority and minority groups within the elected Commune. Now, Olivier referred to Republicans being in the majority and then made a reference to 1792, I think, as that. Now, Engels argued in his book that the Blanquists were the majority and the Proudhonists, the international workers, the First International representatives, were a minority. But my question is, what do you mean, or what group was involved when you describe the Republicans, and what is the reference to 1792? So, thank you, comrades. Thank you, Olivier.
Alors, deuxième question. Il s'agit des différents groupes dans la direction de la Commune et leur relation avec 1792. Alors, Engels a dit que la majorité de la commune étaient des gens des banquistes et des proudhoniens. Donc, quel est le cas et quel est le lien avec 1772?
If we have the lux of Bob doing the translation, I could speak in French and Bob
Oui.
could translate.
Vas-y.
Ok, merci.
Okay.
Alors, la question d'Ousmane sur les souvenirs et les effets de la commune. Donc, je pense que ce qui est resté le plus vif, c'est le souvenir de la répression et du massacre. Et de la... Bon, parce que pendant les 15 ans qui ont suivi, ça a été la répression et la mise hors la loi avec le pire qui était les déportations en Algérie ou en Nouvelle-Calédonie, comme Louise Michel l'a subi.
So I think the most living recollection of the Paris Commune is of the massacres and the repression, and after that the terrible effects of the deportations to North Africa and even to the Pacific.
Ensuite, le souvenir, parce que par exemple, il y avait eu les grands massacres de juin 1848, bon, qui avait été le massacre des ouvriers en juin 1848. Bon, mais ça, par exemple, ça n'a pas laissé un grand souvenir. Mais par contre, le souvenir de la déchirure de la commune à travers ces dizaines de milliers de morts, c'est là qu'on a vraiment l'émergence de la conscience de la classe ouvrière française et de son indépendance et de sa rupture avec le mouvement bourgeois républicain antérieur.
Sorry. The memory of the massacres of 1848 does not live in the same way in the working class, but the thousands of deaths of 1872 really live on in the working class.
Donc ensuite, pour les souvenirs de la commune, bon, en fait, il y a économiquement et socialement, hormis la protection du travail des apprentis boulangers, la suspension du paiement des loyers et qu'est-ce qu'il y avait d'autre? Il y avait aussi la suspension temporaire des remboursements pour les dettes. Il n'y a pas une grande œuvre sociale. Bon, les principaux éléments sociaux, c'est l'enseignement public laïque, avec l'éviction du clergé qui a été viré de l'école, et la forme démocratique dans les différents conseils d'arrondissement, dans les différentes communes, qui ont été vraiment une démocratie intégrale, avec la place des femmes à égalité avec les hommes dans le combat. Et donc c'était que le début, c'était que le commencement du règne de la majorité. Ils n'ont pas eu le temps d'en faire plus, quoi.
Yeah. So economically and socially, the memory of the commune does live on. The protection of the bakers' apprentices, the rent moratorium, the moratorium on debts, on the payment of debts, the fact that the clergy were thrown out of education, and the democratic forms that operated in the various wards and boroughs and districts of Paris, democratic forms with also women's equality in them. So this was the beginning of a conception of majority rule. Okay.
Pour répondre à Laurent sur la commune en province, donc il y a eu plusieurs tentatives entre la fin de la guerre et en septembre et l'apparition de la commune. Donc il y a eu à Marseille, à Lyon, à Limoges. Je ne sais même pas la liste parce qu'on a tellement peu l'habitude de... Mais en tout cas, ce qui est sûr, c'est que si la commune avait écrasé l'armée versaillaise, la pression militaire serait retombée et les autres communes auraient pu se stabiliser et se développer.
Ah, oui. Alors, la question des autres communes en diverses villes en France, si ces tentatives auraient pu réussir, donc Paris aurait pu défaire les armées de Versailles.
Non, je voulais dire, si la commune avait détruit l'armée de Versailles,
ah bon,
si la commune avait détruit l'armée de Versailles, les autres communes en province auraient pu se développer.
Sometimes getting mixed up what language I'm in. If these other communes, if the commune in Paris had succeeded in defeating the army of Versailles, then these other communes in Paris, in France, would have developed. Yeah, je crois que c'est là.
Pour répondre à Finn sur les nationalisations, alors je ne suis pas sûr, mais je pense surtout que ce qu'évoque Engels, c'est l'unification de la classe par-delà la fragmentation des industries. C'est plutôt l'aspect politique que l'aspect économique. Je crois que c'est plutôt le sens de son propos.
Just, I think in relation to Finbar, what Engels was saying about nationalization is much more than being economic. He's showing that the working class could overcome its fragmentation into different industries. And Engels was emphasizing that it could unify politically.
Pour répondre toujours à Finn sur les nationalisations opérées sous Mitterrand, d'une part, il n'y a jamais eu de contrôle ouvrier pendant ces nationalisations et le fonctionnement de l'État et de l'économie en général, et même s'il y avait des avancées sociales concrètes, avec la réduction du temps de travail, la retraite à 60 ans ou des choses comme ça, fondamentalement, le fonctionnement de l'économie et le fonctionnement de l'État restaient un fonctionnement capitaliste. Donc, il n'y avait même pas de contrôle ouvrier.
Yeah. So the first point is, sorry, on the one hand, there was no workers' control over the functioning of the economy as a whole. Of course, they made advances on the questions at work, like working hours and so forth. But the economy still functioned as a capitalist economy.
Je peux donner un exemple personnel, c'est que dans mon établissement, là où je travaille, pendant plus de 25 ans, j'ai été élu au conseil d'administration pour mon syndicat CGT et tout ce qui était attendu des représentants du personnel élus par le personnel, c'était d'approuver la politique patronale. On n'avait pas plus de droits. Donc nous, ce qu'on faisait, c'était développer la position du syndicat et refuser d'endosser les mesures régressives qui, depuis le tournant vers la rigueur en 1983, sont le lot de la fonction publique.
So, well, in my own personal experience, I was elected at work onto the Works Council, but all that was expected of the workers' reps on the Works Council was to respond to the initiatives that came from the management, what positions the trade unions might have about them. In other words, we weren't expected to put our own views forward for the way things should be run.
And au sujet de la référence à 1792.
Yeah, and about 1792, the year 1792.
Donc 1792-1793, c'est les périodes de la révolution, la première révolution française, où il y a eu le plus de poussées révolutionnaires face à la réaction et surtout face à l'agression des armées réactionnaires royales des autres pays européens pour écraser la révolution, et où donc le pays a connu une fièvre révolutionnaire très forte.
So, the 1792 was the point in the first Great French Revolution of the maximum popular mobilization against the reactionaries in France and against foreign intervention, and the period of the most feverish revolutionary activity.
Et dans le, comment dire, durant pendant les 12 années durant au moins les 10-15 dernières années du règne de Napoléon, il y avait eu le développement du mouvement ouvrier avec l'influence de Proudhon, l'influence de Blanqui, qui était la perpétuation du souvenir de la première révolution, avec justement là les conceptions putschistes de coups de force pour tenter d'appuyer sur le cours de l'histoire.
So, pardon.
Et je finis ou tu veux? Alors, et là-dedans, entre guillemets, les vrais marxistes, il n'y en avait pas. Bon, il y avait des gens qui étaient comme Varlin, qui au début était un ouvrier syndicaliste imbibé par l'esprit proudhonien ou des traces de blanquisme, mais il a été influencé dans ses contacts avec Marx, dans les échanges que Marx a eus avec lui, et il a complètement évolué, plus encore pendant la période de la Commune.
Talking about the importance of the year 1792. During the 12 years of the rule of Louis Napoleon, that is from 1848 to 1870, that you had a development of the workers' movement in France, really based on the politics of Proudhon. And also you had the group around Blanqui, which was obsessed by the memory of that great mobilization of 1792, and was really trying to reenact that. Amongst them, the real Marxists, and there were people in touch with Marx and discussing with him, and they did develop, but they were in a minority.
Okay, can I move on to some more speakers now? There's a couple of hands up. Ed.
I'd like to thank Olivier very much for his very informative introduction.
Je voudrais bien remercier Olivier pour son introduction très bien informée.
I'll try not to take too long. Just one comment on the 1792 revolution. Prior to that, most rebellions had been against injustice, against particular grievances that were experienced by the peasants. 1792 was the first modern revolution to really fight not just against injustice, but for a different form of society, the end of the rule of monarchs and the establishment of some kind of bourgeois system of rule.
Just a quick thing. Are you talking about 1789 in general?
Yeah, I am.
Was a specific point. Alors, la révolution de 1749 était la première révolution était la première révolution qui n'était pas simplement contre l'injustice en soi, mais contre la monarchie.
Okay. And the significance of the Paris events that we're talking about is that this was the first arrival on the stage of history of an attempt by the working class to establish an independent form of rule that wasn't bourgeois, that wasn't connected with the bourgeois, but was based on principles of working class democracy.
Et la significance de la Commune de Paris, c'était l'arrivée sur la scène de la classe ouvrière avec la conception d'une nouvelle démocratie d'un type nouvelle.
Some of the principles remain really important parts of the program of demand that any modern revolution of the working class has to assert.
Et plusieurs entre les principes, tous les principes de cette révolution restent centrales pour tous les programmes que produit la classe ouvrière.
Such as all officials should receive no higher wage than the average wage of the people they represent.
Par exemple, aucun officier de nouvel État peut recevoir un salaire plus que le salaire moyen d'un ouvrier. De ce qu'il représente.
That there should be no standing army, but if there do have to be guns and truncheons in society, they should be under the control of the people as a whole.
Qu'il n'y a pas d'armée permanente, mais si on a besoin des armes de toutes sortes, cela doit être sous le contrôle du peuple.
And to safeguard against the establishment of permanent bureaucracy, another really valuable principle of this movement was that there should be a rotation of administrative duties so that nobody occupies bureaucracy permanently.
Et comme sauvegarde contre l'établissement d'une bureaucratie permanente, la rotation des offices publics.
The last point I want to make, if you read bourgeois accounts of the Paris Commune, it's all gloom and doom because this revolution was defeated, it was crushed.
Si, et pour finir, quand on lit les comptes rendus bourgeoises de la Commune, c'est tout en désespoir à tous azimuts, parce que ce sont des comptes rendus de la défaite de ce mouvement.
But many of its initiatives formed the basis for future pressure that was put on the ruling class, even in bourgeois societies.
Yeah. Beaucoup de ces, mais beaucoup des initiatives de la Commune ont formé la base de la pression de la part de la classe ouvrière pour des revendications, même des réformes.
For example, public buildings were requisitioned to house the homeless, and within a
Par
few days,
exemple, on a réquisitionné les bâtiments publics pour accommoder les pauvres.
and within a few decades, bourgeois governments were introducing public housing for the poorest. This was a response to the initiatives that the Parisian workers had taken.
Et nous trouvons que quelques décennies après la Commune, les gouvernements bourgeois ont commencé à construire les HLM pour les pauvres.
Because they feared the hot breath of proletarian revolution.
C'est une réponse à la Commune de Paris. C'est parce qu'ils ont senti la haleine chaude de la révolution prolétarienne.
At the time of the Paris Commune, no working class children went to school.
À l'époque de la Commune, aucun enfant ouvrier a pu aller à l'école.
And the communards took over the schools and opened them up for everybody.
Mais les communards se sont emparés de l'école. Ils ont ouvert l'école pour tous.
And within a few decades, bourgeois governments were opening public education for people of all classes.
Et 2 ou 3 décennies plus tard, les États bourgeois ont ouvert l'école à toute la population de toute classe, des enfants de toute classe.
So even though the communards were crushed and drowned in blood, much of their struggle had a lasting effect on the future policies of Europe.
Même si les communards ont été écrasés dans le sang et la mort, beaucoup de leur programme a été rempli dans les années suivantes.
And of course, it forms a template for how the working class can take power in the future.
Template, you got me there, Ed. A template, pattern, muster. Come on, Dito.
Beatrix, help us out.
Help
Template.
us out. It's a vocabulary.
Oh, you're muted, Beatrix. You're muted.
Yeah.
I was typing something, so
I said it's my last sentence.
Okay.
The Commune forms a template for the kind of struggles that workers will create in the future.
Donc ça, c'était la Commune a formé une sorte de format en fait de modèle pour les futures luttes révolutionnaires et ouvrières qui ont suivi.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
but can I say something? In fact, the free, compulsory, and non-denominational, state education became compulsory in was promulgated in 1972 by Luc Ferry. So straight after the Commune.
1872. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same in England. The Education Act of 1871.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well.
Okay.
I'll get back mute.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much for Ed. Continued thanks to Bob for translating. Mark Goudet has got his hand up now. Would you like to come in?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for. Okay, so I'm going to follow in French. Alors juste un point, c'est sur l'aspect militaire. Hein. Je ne pense pas que la Commune aurait pu avoir une seule chance de gagner, dans la mesure où l'armée prussienne était incroyablement plus développée, militairement armée, et que si effectivement la Commune de Paris avait attaqué tout de suite les Versaillais, elle aurait pu gagner peut-être, mais les Prussiens auraient envahi Paris du coup. Donc, elle n'aurait aucune chance de gagner. Je pense, c'est mon point de vue, hein, bon, c'est partagé par un certain nombre d'autres gens. Ceci dit, je veux dire, c'est un soulèvement ouvrier. C'est ça qui est intéressant. C'est effectivement la guerre civile, ça a été une organisation ouvrière, de la classe ouvrière contre, effectivement, contre le gouvernement de tiers qui était à majorité monarchiste. Et je voudrais souligner le fait, enfin, je ne sais pas si j'ai dit trop de choses, je voudrais juste souligner le fait que le suffrage, à cette époque-là, c'est un suffrage censitaire. C'était que les riches qui votaient. Et en plus de la province, hein, qui ont été effectivement très stimulés par l'Église hein, contre effectivement le mouvement ouvrier. Et du coup, effectivement, ça a donné une... C'est pas le peuple français. C'est le premier point. Peut-être que je laisse Bob traduire.
I don't know if I quite got all of that. First of all, Mark, you said, I don't think the Commune would have won if they had fought against the Prussian army.
En fait, si, ce que je dis, c'est si, par hasard, hein, la Commune aurait pu vaincre les Versaillais, si effectivement, comme le dit Marx, elle l'avait fait au début, parce que les Versaillais étaient assez désorganisés dès le début,
Yeah.
elle aurait pu gagner, mais il ne faut pas oublier une chose, c'est que les Prussiens faisaient le siège de Paris,
Yeah.
et à ce moment-là, ils auraient envahi Paris. C'était sûr, ça. Et ce que
Yeah.
il faut prendre en
Okay,
compte...
so if I can just get that. If the Commune had tried to do the things that Marx said they ought to do while they were still facing the Prussian army, they would have been hammered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
By the Prussian.
No, I think, Bob, can I just say something? If the Commune had actually attacked the Versailles army right at the beginning, as Marx recommended, the Prussian army was there and they would have invaded Paris.
Yeah.
I think, yes.
But
That's Mark is okay?
Yes, it's exactly that. In fact, we have not to forget that the Prussians surrounded Paris and never the Garde Nationale during 5 months succeed to break this surrounding. So there was no issue, in fact. But I'm going to continue in French.
Oui.
Ça, c'est le premier point. Il y a eu beaucoup d'erreurs militaires qui ont été faites par l'armée, par la guerre nationale et par l'armée des communards. Il ne faut pas oublier ça parce que ce n'étaient pas des professionnels, tout simplement. Ils n'avaient pas l'expérience de la guerre. Et ça doit aussi nous rappeler que, en fait, l'armée, ce n'est pas l'outil de la classe ouvrière, quoi. Parce qu'en face de nous, on a des super professionnels qui font ça et qui ont une grosse expérience de la guerre. Le deuxième point, c'est que, comment dire, les acquis de la Commune de Paris sont quand même très grands, et en particulier, le point le plus important à mon avis, c'est les ateliers communaux. Hein, en juin 1948, c'est à la fermeture des ateliers communaux que le peuple de Paris s'est soulevé. Et là, la Commune de Paris, elle l'a fait. Et elle a créé des ateliers communaux dans lesquels travaillaient des hommes et des femmes, d'accord, enfin c'était séparé, et qui étaient autogérés par les travailleurs et qui permettaient de faire vivre la population ouvrière de Paris sur des commandes de la Commune.
Yeah, and amongst the gains of the Paris Commune, a very big one was the national workshops. That is the phrase in English, isn't it?
Yes, it's okay.
The atelier, the workshops in common ownership, where men and women worked together, and it's enabled Paris to live. It gave a living to the people of Paris. Yeah.
Non, en fait, il y avait des ateliers de femmes et des ateliers d'hommes ouvrières. Je ne sais pas s'ils étaient mixtes. Je sais qu'il y avait des ateliers de femmes pour les femmes.
There were women's workshops.
Women and men workshop, but I'm not sure it was mixed.
All right, yeah, okay. Separate, but both. Okay.
Et puis, un des grands points de la Commune de Paris, c'est la laïcité. la séparation de l'Église et de l'État et la laïcité. Ça, c'est un grand point pour l'époque. Enfin, pour aujourd'hui, ça nous paraît évident. À cette époque-là, c'était une grosse révolution sociale, sociétale.
And another point, a huge point, was that it was secular. And that's its importance today. It was a big change, big revolution.
Et troisième point, je voudrais dire aussi une chose, c'est qu'il y avait Courbet qui était à la tête, il y avait des commissions dans la Commune de Paris, et en particulier la commission des artistes. Et un des grands thèmes de cette commission, c'était de créer des expositions pour permettre à la classe ouvrière d'accéder à l'art.
Ah, and there were commissions set up by the Paris Commune to open up the arts to the working class.
Et puis, je voudrais dire encore une chose, c'est que c'est comme dans toutes les révolutions, il y avait une très très grande foisonnement d'expressions, et il y a eu quelque chose comme 150 journaux qui ont été créés pendant la Commune. Il y en a qui duraient que quelques jours, mais il y a eu une expression, une créativité énorme pendant cette période révolutionnaire. Et ça, ce qu'on retrouve dans toutes les révolutions, dès que le carcan se dessert, tout de suite la créativité se développe.
Yeah, and like in all revolutions, there was a huge ferment and an explosion of creativity.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Pas de quoi.
Okay, that's it, Mark. Mark finished now. Okay, Temos, you're next.
Yes, I have been listening to the lead-off and the discussion with fascination. And it's amazing how these discussions on the Commune, they are fascinating, and we get something out of these discussions. Of course, much of this stems from the fact that Marx had wrote a very important analysis, going into the nuts and bolts of the whole situation and not confining himself to vague descriptions and vague conclusions from that. And it set me thinking that it's probably worth trying to discuss today's revolutions in this nuts and bolts way, and we could get a lot of lessons out of those. And I'm thinking of so-called revolutions, for example, and the color revolutions after the fall of the Soviet Union, and see what they were actually, how did they develop, what was going on, what was the working class doing, or more important revolutions, Arab Spring. Arab Spring maybe is not the sort of revolution that we are used to, but they are very important to understand in the context of the periphery of capitalism and what happens there. Syriza is a very important one, and we have to see what happened there. What were the specific issues that came up? It's not enough to say that, I mean, we all agree that Syriza betrayed the revolution, but how? What happened? What was lacking? I mean, Roger wrote a very important analysis of this, and we could have a useful discussion of that, in the sense that we could get lessons from this. Or even neo-revolutions like Corbyn and Sanders. Again, it's easy to understand the general issues there, but going into the nuts and bolts of what happened, it could give us something to go on and get important lessons. The little known revolution in Rojava, again, a very important one. I haven't seen serious discussions about it. And of also the current ongoing revolutions, the various risings that we see around us, Belarus, Chile, Hong Kong, and others. So I would suggest that we should think of how to approach these events, not in the sense that we get a position on them, but to draw out the lessons that we can for our work. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Temos. Bob, are you summarising that?
There we go. Might need backup. Thémis a écouté avec fascination les discussions sur la commune. Il dit, nous gagnons chaque fois que nous avons une telle discussion, nous gagnons quelque chose, nous trouvons quelque chose de nouveau. Et c'est parce que Marx a écrit une analyse très importante avec des descriptions et des conclusions très exactes au sujet de la commune. Et peut-être faut-il faire la même chose avec les révolutions, les soulèvements de nos jours. Par exemple, les révolutions de couleur dans l'ex-URSS et le printemps arabe pour comprendre mieux le capitalisme de nos jours. Il faut soumettre ces événements à la même analyse très spécifique comme celle de Marx à l'époque de la Commune de Paris. Même chose avec Syriza. Roger a rédigé un compte rendu très important sur la Grèce. En quel sens a Syriza trahi le mouvement en Grèce? Spécifiquement, concrètement, comment? Et même chose avec les mouvements autour de Jeremy Corbyn et Sanders aux États-Unis, ici et aux États-Unis. Il fallait se rendre compte spécifiquement des détails de ces mouvements et leur contexte. Même la révolution, même chose, très peu connue à Rojava en Syrie. Et les soulèvements de Bélarus et Hong Kong. Comment aborder ces événements? Pas tellement pour établir quelle est la politique exacte, correcte, mais pour comprendre ce qu'on peut mieux comprendre en les analysant.
I speak in French. Is possible?
Vas-y.
Yes, someone translate, yeah.
Oui, alors, la Commune de Paris était résolument internationaliste, internationale. Si les Prussiens avaient un drapeau tricolore, les Versaillais un drapeau tricolore, les communards ou les communeux, comme ils s'appelaient eux-mêmes, avaient un drapeau rouge qui était le drapeau universel des travailleurs. Ils avaient accepté dans leur rang des étrangers occupant des postes très importants dans la commune, comme Dombrowski qui était polonais, Léo Frankel qui était hongrois. Donc la commune nous donne ce message internationaliste que nous devons reprendre pour aujourd'hui dans nos luttes quotidiennes. Donc ça, c'est la première leçon de la Commune de Paris. Et c'est vrai que les communards, s'ils sont tombés, il faut qu'on prenne leçon pour eux. Et pour nous, c'est un immense enthousiasme de voir que la commune n'est pas morte. Et comme dit la chanson sur la commune, tout ça n'empêche pas Nicolas que la commune n'est pas morte. Merci.
Did not die. Okay. Right. The first point is the commune was resolutely internationalist. The communards didn't hold up the tricolor against the Prussian flag. They held up the red flag. They accepted foreigners in their ranks. Many foreign fighters fought in the ranks of the commune. And if we learn the lessons and take forward the lessons of the commune, then they did not die in vain and the commune is not dead.
Right, Olivier.
Oui, sur l'aspect militaire et économique. Alors, sur l'aspect économique, je crois que bon, les communards n'ont pas eu le temps de développer tranquillement une économie parce que ils étaient dans la guerre civile et il fallait qu'ils se défendent. Donc, l'œuvre économique, même s'il y a eu des formes, la mise en place de formes collectives, comme les ateliers autogérés, bon, ils ont été dans la survie matérielle par rapport à l'effort de guerre civile. Donc, on n'a pas eu le temps d'expérimenter. Par contre, sur l'aspect militaire, par rapport à ce qu'a dit André tout à l'heure, c'est vrai que le grand soutien du gouvernement de Versailles, c'était bel et bien l'armée prussienne. Et l'armée Bismarck avait fait libérer 50 000 soldats français qui étaient emprisonnés pour aller renforcer l'armée versaillaise. Alors, ce que alors, la bourgeoisie française a remercié la bourgeoisie allemande en 1918, quand il y a eu la fin de la guerre et l'effondrement du Reich sous l'effet de la révolution menée par les spartakistes, et où les alliés, la France en particulier, tout en ayant vaincu l'Allemagne, ont laissé tous les moyens à l'armée allemande pour écraser la révolution allemande de 1919 et les années suivantes. Et que là-dessus, il n'y a jamais eu d'obstacle pour s'entraider entre bourgeois.
Yeah, shall I translate this? So first of all, Olivier says on the economic aspects, the communards didn't have the leisure to sit down and work out their views, their plans for the economic development. They were surviving physically against their enemies. The steps they did take were immediate questions of working class conditions. And secondly, the major support for the Versailles, the reactionary armies that came and crushed the Commune, was the Prussians, the Germans. The Bismarck released French prisoners of war to go and join Thiers and his forces to crush the Commune. And in 1918, the French bourgeoisie expressed its gratitude to the German bourgeoisie for that support by releasing German prisoners of war to go and join the forces that crushed the Spartacists and the other revolutions in Germany, the other Soviets that were set up in Germany. Yeah, ça continue.
You got any more, Olivier? You've muted yourself, so I don't know if that means you finished or not. No? No, I think Olivier may have finished what he was saying, possibly.
Could I make...
Olivier, Pam demande si tu as fini avec ce que tu veux dire.
Oui, j'ai fini.
Right, I was right then. Okay. Thank you.
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
Nobody's yet answered. Beatrice's question. She quotes Eleanor Marx, and it's a very important point which we can't let up. Eleanor Marx wrote about the Commune. It was the first revolution that existed to abolish class domination and not to produce the domination of a new class over an old class. Now, it's a very important matter because I think many of us here will understand that such a revolution is also it establishes the domination of the working class above all other classes. But it's to me anyway, it's a step towards dissolving all class domination. That's how I would see it, but I wonder what other comrades on the call would, how they would answer that. Pour reprendre en français, Béatrice a cité Eleanor Marx, qui disait que la Commune de Paris, c'était la première révolution qui n'avait pas comme but l'établissement d'une nouvelle oppression de classe, mais d'abolir la domination de classe. Donc, moi, je dis oui, mais cela se passe à travers le pouvoir ouvrier, qui est aussi une classe qui opprime des classes anciennes, la classe bourgeoise. Donc, je suis d'accord avec Engels, mais c'est aussi pas aussi simple.
Thanks, Bob. Does somebody want to respond to that question? Anybody? No hands up at the moment, so the floor is yours. Can't see any hands up, so I'm sort of guessing we've come to the end of the discussion now. Olivier, do you want to just sum it up for a few minutes?
Donc, dans le passé, il y a eu des révoltes d'esclaves, il y a eu des grèves, des grands mouvements pour l'égalité. Mais la Commune est vraiment le premier mouvement moderne où la classe ouvrière réalise la première étape de son pouvoir, avec la destruction de l'appareil d'État bourgeois et la création d'institutions radicalement démocratiques. Et dans les aspects de cette démocratie, on a deux éléments, la place des femmes et la place accordée aux étrangers qui participent au mouvement. Et là, on a l'embryon de tout le mouvement moderne, de tout le mouvement ouvrier actuel. Où le mouvement ouvrier actuel ne peut pas exister sans la place des femmes, et il ne peut pas exister sans action internationale incorporant tous les éléments de la classe ouvrière, quelle que soit leur origine et leur nationalité.
Si je peux traduire ça. So in the past, there were slave revolts and there were peasant revolts. The Paris Commune was the first revolution where the working class took the first steps to establish its power. This involved respect for the position of women and foreigners. This provided a model for all workers' movements since, and defense of the position of women and internationalism.
Il y a un point important aussi, je pense, par rapport à la façon dont le WIN s'est constitué, c'est le débat entre Marx et Bakounine sur les fractions, sur la soi-disant manipulation des marxistes dans l'AIT.
So there is an important point about how the commune was set up, and the relations between the Marxist supporters and Bakunin's supporters, and the allegation that the Marxists were manipulating within the commune.
Dans la commune, mais surtout dans l'AIT, dans les accusations de manipulation des marxistes dans l'AIT.
Ah, but in the Workers' International, sorry. Yeah.
Et qu'en fait, contrairement à la tradition conspirationniste qui pouvait dans laquelle baignaient les bakouninistes et puis les blanquistes, Marx était un poisson dans l'eau.
Yeah, and so in fact, quite unlike the conspiratorial tradition of the Bakuninists and the Blanquists, Marx was like a fish swimming in water.
Et en exprimant le mouvement général, en aidant à son développement par les conseils et les apports, il a été au centre des événements de l'époque, tout en n'ayant pas les moyens que nous avons aujourd'hui avec Internet, avec des tas de ressources matérielles qui n'existaient pas. Mais ils ont quand même réussi, Marx a réussi à mobiliser l'international aux côtés de la Commune, malgré un rôle relativement individuel.
But, so even though they had none of the resources of communications that we've got now, by expressing the general movement, by understanding what the general movement was, Marx was able to be at the heart of what was developing, and he was able to mobilize the International Working Men's Association in support of the Commune.
Et donc, je pense qu'à la fois au niveau du WIN, on doit développer l'éducation et l'organisation socialiste, mais d'une façon comparable à celle que Marx faisait dans l'AIT, c'est-à-dire une façon non sectaire et une façon utile pour le développement du mouvement et des buts de la classe ouvrière.
And I think that Workers' International Network, by developing socialist education and a non-sectarian approach, can contribute to the development of today's movements.
Ce seront mes derniers mots.
And those are my last words.
Merci, camarades, d'avoir supporté patiemment mon exposé.
Thank you, comrades, for having put up with my exposition so patiently.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Olivier, for a superb lead-off. Massive thanks to Bob for all that translation. You did a sterling job. And thank you to Beatrix for stepping up when the occasion calls upon it. So I think we've had an absolutely fantastic discussion. Really like to thank everybody for coming, particularly the French comrades, for coming and talking about the Commune from their point of view. Really, I think that's been so valuable. Far better than reading it in a history book, really. So massive thanks to everybody for coming, for everybody for all the effort that they've put into the meeting. So I think, Roger, do you want me to carry on? Or did you carry on?
If you can hear me,
you can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I also thought it was a fantastic discussion and a truly international discussion. And by the way, as far as I could see, there were comrades from at least 9 countries here, based in 4 continents. And I think even Marx would have given us a little pat on the head to congratulate us for that.